Hey kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to talk about it's a rare superpower these days. It's the ability to have more than one thought in your mind at any given time. And for some people, this ability is so rare that they can't even do it if you give them a long stretch of time. I'm talking about the ability to acknowledge some things and at the same time liking other things, and basically not seeing the world in black and white. I don't see myself as particularly gifted in this way. I mean, it's part of the borderline criteria, basically, that you sometimes have the bad, what's the word I'm seeking? I lost the word here. You basically tend to see people in either black or white, good or bad, and so on. The fact that I do this instinctively is something I don't like. It's something that I do my best to work against, because that is the logical and rational thing to do. A couple of days ago, I posted a video about a lot of things, and this is the point of this video now, where I mentioned a certain orange man in the United States in a negative manner. And this drew the attention of an unusual amount of viewers, because I mentioned it even in the title of the video. And I've deleted a lot of those comments because they were just nasty, and I don't want nasty comments on my channel. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help the algorithm at all. That usually just draws in more nasty people. But I left some of them where his followers were allowed to say their piece, their little salute to the man they love. Who am I to deny them such a right? Anyways, the point of this is that these people, they display an extreme inability to keep more than one thought in their mind at the same time. They are part of the problem with people like Mr. Trump, with a lot of other politicians, just not Trump, in no way at all. This phenomenon happens with a lot of people. It happened with Obama, it happened with Hillary Clinton, it happened with Kamala Harris. This is what happens with politicians. They tend to develop a crowd around them of fans that are seeing things very black and white. And so does a lot of Trump fans. They are not able to see problems with their president. They are, in effect, in a cult, basically, as many other politicians before Mr. Trump have been. Well, that is the nature of politics. It tends to create a cult, should I call it? A good ground for cult thinking, for worshipping and idolizing people. This is very unhealthy. I am in general, I don't like cults. I don't like politics for the simple fact that it tends to create cults. It tends to create this behavior in humans, where we are emotionally attached to questions and we can't really see anything other than 100% in one perspective. If you were to ask me, are there things about Mr. Donald Trump that I agree with? Sure, there's plenty I agree with. There's plenty. I'm not going to go into detail because that's not the point. The point is, there's also other things I don't agree with. And this is the important thing, there are main characteristics about him I do not like. One of them being him obviously showing not much empathy to people in general and being very generalistic in general, if you understand my point. He tends to talk about things in very black and white terms, appealing to people who thinks in very black and white terms. He generalizes about transsexuals, he generalizes about immigrants. He leaves no room for nuances in his rhetorics, and he does so in things that are in general very dangerous and very horrific. I mean, come on, Trump fans, if you can't see the potential issues of rounding up a lot of people, putting them in detention camps and shipping them out of your nation, the potential problems that can arise from this with, innocent children being shot and so on, then you are, in effect, not seeing this in a empathic way. You lack empathy. Now, before you go around ranting about what about the victims of these people? Sure, there are a lot of victims to immigrants who are criminals. There's going to be a lot of victims of the immigrants that are not criminals as well. That is why in moderation is usually the best way to deal with anything. To act not in effect, to not act on fast, irrational gut feelings with violence, but acting slow and in some ways ineffectively is usually the best solution to things. That is my point. The point is that with a president like Mr. Trump, a very hands-on, no bullshit, doing things president, you are going to be risking a lot of things. Obviously risking a lot of things. And you're going to have to put this against the theoretical risk of not doing things this way, which we know already. And I don't like this. I find this a bad way to rule a nation. Sure, there's a lot of places and time where we need action. I agree with that. And anyways, the main thing I'm seeing here that bothers me is a man and a group of people that in so many questions doesn't seem to care about consequences, that don't care what we are seeing in front of ourselves. And I'm talking about, situations where he made fun of a journalist in his last presidential campaign. This journalist who had some form of what's it called? CP, cerebral palsy. I can't really remember right now. And he made fun of this. And at his side are people with all kinds of delusional perspective on humans. There are religious nuts that kind of sees the world in a biblical sense. I mean, we're talking about archaic Bronze Age values here that have no place in a modern society. And then there are people who like Mr. Elon Musk, who has obvious personal issues with transsexuals because of his own children. And then you have, well, this anti-transsexual thing going on, which is just strange. I mean, we're talking about a very small percentage of people, and they are taking up so much mind, so much thought, so much obsessive thinking from the Republicans, especially those who are very much fans of Mr. Trump, that you are making bills about this, bills about transsexuals in the army. How could that even be a thing? How many transsexuals are there in the army? And are they a problem? Are they not patriots that, I mean, are willing to sacrifice their life for the country? I mean, we're talking about people who probably, if you compare them to the haters, are doing a lot more for the country than you are, to be fair. I mean, looking yourself in the mirror, your fat ass in the mirror, to use the phrasing of what a what a Trumpster would do, probably. Are you doing your service for the nation? Are you? Really? Or just sitting at home whining about some guy / girl which you can't really identify the gender of? Is that the problem, really? And the point is, if that is a problem for you, I'm suspecting that you are not a good person. You are probably a nasty person at heart, because you are projecting odd things on people that are already not having an easy life. If you're seeing everything in this black and white image where all immigrants are bad and transsexuals are molesters and problems and so on, you are seeing things in a very, very nasty filter, because this is simply not factually true. It isn't. It is just a made-up reality with no basis in statistics. And you're also I don't know if willing is the word, but you are obviously not looking at other problems in society, like the fact that let's talk about transsexuals and what they are accused of. You are usually the most common suspect in American society of doing child abuse is a white, straight, Christian man. Without any comparison, the majority of abuses are from this sort of perpetrator. And if you look at it globally, there's a huge number of discrepancies where the majority of these things, percent-wise, is done by priests, the clergymen of like the Catholic Church. Now, not everyone, of course, but there you go. You have a group of people that are percent-wise highly outnumbering other groups. We're not seeing a lot of political parties acting for the deportation of Catholics from the United States, are we? Despite them being in a statistically a lot worse group to look at when it comes to rape. And I'm talking about the clergymen then. Stuff like that. And I'm not arguing for that. Don't get me wrong. I'm just arguing for the fact that if you look at people as groups, which you just generalize about as a problem, and not the individuals doing it, you are going to create a society that is not seeing things nuanced. You're going to create a society that deals with the oppression of what usually is already quite weak groups, because it is always the weak groups that are facing the heat. It is. I addressed this before in another video, that the use of phrasing here is also interesting. When you describe something like transsexuals in having a mental illness of some sort, you are walking a very strange line between a lot of realities. Because even if it is some form of condition that makes people not being, normally straight or so on, you're using the phrasing in a derogatory way. And the only reason you're doing this is because you see mental conditions as something inherently derogatory. You're not willing to accept the fact that, hey, this is not a problem unless you make it a problem. Unless there is a straight person that is a bigot that makes this a problem, that there is guys that don't identify themselves as guys, for whatever reason they are doing this, you're using mental condition as a derogatory. This is the society we are creating when we elect populistic people that deal with blaming and stomping on people that are already having a hard time in society. Because transsexuals are by far probably the group that, if you look at all groups in society, that are having the worst time. Sure, there are safe bubbles out there where they aren't, and good for them. I think they need it. Everybody needs the place to feel safe. Why should every place in the known world be a battleground where everybody is entitled to attack someone? I'm an advocate of free speech. I want everything to be discussed. Everything. But that doesn't mean I want it to be discussed everywhere at all times. I'm not going to pretend that my vlog here is a safe ground for free speech either. It is probably going to be a safe space for two things. People that are feeling bad for their mental condition, and it's just going to be my own safe space. If I choose to delete a comment, I will. Because there's no point in people just being allowed to rant and spill out their guts about things, their hateful nature. Because we know that already. You have made yourself abundantly clear that you exist, and you've even taken power, being a majority of the, at least the electors. I mean, don't let me get started on the US election system. It's absolutely absurd. Well, you have the power in the United States. There's no doubt about that. The most powerful nation in the world. You are not a group that is being silenced anymore. You are the group in power. And guess what? You know what I always support, no matter what, is the right to kick the ass of the person above yourself. The person in power should always fear the person below themselves. That is just the way things work in a democracy. In a normal Western society, the rulers, whoever they might be, should always be worried that the people below them will, say their will. And if not being respected, they will take action. They will kick your ass away from power. That's basically what the Republicans did with the Democratic ruling system in America. They did, to be fair. The Democrats failed badly to acknowledge certain things, failed badly in how they approached this question, and they paid the price in many ways. That's not the whole the whole answer to this thing, why the Democrats lost, of course, is not. But it's a part of it. Let's just acknowledge it. Let's acknowledge the fact that the Democrats sucked in so many ways in the United States. But they'll never fall into the trap of then starting to believe that the Republicans are going to be, in any sort of manner, the good guys. Because these are the guys that continuously mock and kick people below themselves. That's the history of that party for the last, 80 or 90 years at least. And as a Swede commenting on this, I can do so from the sideline, of course. My privileged sideline here, living in a quite peaceful country, at least in theory. Yeah, because like the comment section says, we have problems. But unlike what the comment section says, on my last video that is, it is not because of some strange takeover from Muslims. It is because we have gang issues here. Gangs that consists of all kinds of people, mostly immigrants and second generation immigrants actually. They come from all sorts of nations. They are not all Muslims. Forget about that moronic comment. And basically, if you look at people here in Sweden that comes from Islamic countries, very few of them are practicing Islam. Most of them have become quite secularized actually. So they're just culturally inherited from those nations. I saw some numbers of around 100,000 citizens or people living in Sweden that regularly visits a mosque. 100,000. That's not the majority of the Swedish people. We are 10 million, actually. So the rest of these people who are immigrants, I think they constitute somewhere around 1 million. A big share of the Swedish population, for sure. They are not religious fanatics. That's not how it works. They are not trying to create an Islamic state or anything else. And I'm pretty sure neither are those 100,000 also. There are people within those groups that of course are going to do so, just as there is with every religious fanatics. There are going to be groups that are more inclined to want certain things than others. And yeah, Sweden has a problem here. We are struggling with how to deal with this. And the interesting thing is that it is quite similar to what happens in Mexico, according to the experts. The gang-related violence in Mexico. The only difference is that the gangs haven't really infiltrated the Swedish society and the power of it. They are not in control of the police, they are not in control of military or anything like that. They have tried. There's been cases where this has been proven, but thanks to our very transparent system, these things generally become very quickly detected. Now there are problems in all kinds of manners with this. It's a very complicated question. And people should note that in power right now in Sweden is the right-wing party. This is not a liberal lefty party at all. And they are supported by the nationalistic populists, the really right-wing party of Sweden. Let's put it that way. And they're still failing. Their tough guy approach, which they are really taking on, we have these all kinds of quite nasty takes on how to deal with this. None of them have worked, actually, because this is a complicated question. You need to, cut the fuel from the fire. You can't just pour water on it and think that will work. You need to stop people from adding fuel to the fire. And there's a lot of things going on there. One of them has been dealt with quite a few years ago, and we basically have almost no immigration here anymore. So that's not where they come from. They come from young kids, usually, that struggles with finding a future here in Sweden. Because Sweden is not a very easy nation to integrate with. We are not inherently multicultural. We are probably quite rigid in how we see the world. So if you come from another culture, it's difficult to integrate here for sure. And this whole thing of integrating people is a very expensive, it's a very costly, a very complicated thing, especially when dealing with second generation immigrants who are Swedish citizens, who in all sorts of ways usually want to become a part of society but are denied. Most of them don't even get a chance of getting to an interview with a job. That is a very common thing, that you want to get a job in Sweden. If you are a second generation immigrant or an immigrant, you have to change your name, because otherwise they won't even call you for a job interview. So they change the name to something very Swedish. It's ridiculous, I know, but it's actually very common. And there's no quick solution to this, unless you want to go old fascist. That is always a solution. You could always round up a lot of people and just, end them in sort of ways, like the Nazis did. That could solve things. I'm saying this ironically because this is actually what a lot of people want to do here as well. People want to overreact, and they want to just stomp on things without proportion. Because the simple fact is that these shootings, the bombs we have seen, for 99% of the Swedish population, doesn't affect us. It doesn't. We don't see it. It doesn't happen where we live. I mean, I live on the countryside. There's no bombs being thrown here. And for most people living in small rural settings and towns, there's nothing going on. This is a situation that is isolated to some of the major urban areas, the problematic areas where we have placed a lot of people that are fighting for the same chance in one spot. That is not a good politic at all. And I firmly believe that we have a lot of work to do to make this work. It's going to involve both being tough on the current criminals and making sure we don't create new ones at the same time. We have to work really hard on integrating those we have here a lot better than we have. And integration is a complicated question. No question about it, with no simple answers. But we are not dealing with a lot of illegal immigrants like you have in the Americas. I don't know if you have the big problem with it as you think you have, but sure, let's just acknowledge you have. But the situation is not similar. And nuanced, seeing things in shades of gray instead of black and white. That is how you deal with things as a logical and rational person. It is only people who are victims of not being very bright or having emotional issues, like people with, like myself, with borderline, that tends to see things in black and white. And guess what? If a person suffering quite badly from time to time from borderline, if I can deal in thinking with a nuanced and in many ways very vague way to see things, guess what? Then you can do it as well. Because what's your excuse? Come on, what's your excuse in seeing things in black and white? Mine is a diagnosis that I'm working hard to overcome. Put that into perspective, my fellow hateful Republicans. Put that in perspective. And always remember, you come a long way of living like Jesus do. And this is an atheist reminding you that if you look into the Bible, the New Testament, not the old one. The old one is irrelevant. If you look at the New Testament, the one with Jesus, remember him? Empathy and forgiveness is a major part of everything in that story. Even I know that as an atheist. But it's really, really sad watching all you religious fanatics, not only in America, but across the world, basically forgetting your own religion. Because you're so entrenched in personal cult of these megalomaniacs with billions of dollars that don't care one bit about you. You're so entrenched in defending them, being fanboys and fangirls, that you forget your own precious religion. And that is probably the most saddest part of this, actually. Anyways, it's cold, it's chilly, it's windy, and this is the Borderline Man, signing off.